I was supposed to be out of town that night. That's what she thought, at least. Work trip, 2 days, some corporate nonsense that I didn't give a damn about. But the deal fell through last minute, and instead of wasting time in a hotel, I drove straight home, thinking about surprising my wife. I didn't text her, didn't call. I just pulled into our driveway around 10 p.m., expecting to find her curled up on the couch, binge-watching one of her trashy reality shows. The house was dark. No lights in the living room, no TV flickering. That was the first thing that felt off. Jessica wasn't the early-to-bed type. Then I noticed the car. Not hers. A sleek black Audi parked a few houses down, just barely visible from my driveway. I wouldn't have paid attention if I hadn't seen it before. Once, twice, parked on our street at odd hours. My stomach tightened. I stepped inside. Quiet. The air smelled different. Faint cologne, something musky. Not mine. My brain was trying to catch up, to make sense of what I already knew but didn't want to accept. And then I heard it. Low voices. From upstairs. My body moved before my mind did. Up the stairs, 2 at a time, down the hall. The bedroom door was half closed, and I could see just enough. Enough to make my blood go cold. Jessica. My wife. Naked. Twisted in the sheets with some guy. Some guy in our bed. For a second, I just stood there. Not breathing. Not thinking. Just watching the scene like I wasn't even in my own body. The bastard was laughing. Whispering something in her ear. And she was smiling. Smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. Something inside me snapped. I pushed the door open hard enough for it to slam against the wall. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet of the room. Jessica's head snapped toward me, her eyes wide, mouth open. The guy froze, halfway between whatever dirty thing he was about to do. For a split second, no one moved. Then chaos. Jessica yanked the sheets up, scrambling back. The guy, some 30-something, gym rat-looking douchebag, jumped out of bed like he'd been electrocuted. Who the hell are you? He blurted out, reaching for his clothes. I didn't even look at him. My eyes were locked on Jessica. You want to tell him, or should I? My voice was eerily calm, even though my whole body was thrumming with rage. Jessica's lips parted. She was calculating. I could see it. The gears in her head turning, scrambling for a way out, a way to spin this. Then she went for the classic move, anger. What the hell, Ethan? You can't just barge in here like some psycho. I laughed. I actually laughed. Barge in? Psycho? I gestured at the bed. You're screwing another man in my house? And you have the nerve to act like I'm the problem? Her face twisted, but she wasn't ashamed. No, Jessica never did shame. She did defensive. Maybe if you weren't so busy with work all the time, I wouldn't have to. I didn't let her finish. Don't you dare. My voice was low, sharp as a knife. You don't get to blame this on me. You don't get to rewrite reality just because you got caught. The guy, who still hadn't introduced himself, finally found his boxers and made the worst decision of his life. Look, man, I think you should just leave. Clearly, things aren't working between you two. So maybe. I turned on him so fast he actually took a step back. Shut your mouth. You don't get to talk. You don't exist in this conversation. He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, but something in my face must have made him think twice. He grabbed his jeans and practically sprinted toward the door, nearly tripping over himself. Jessica had the audacity to roll her eyes. Oh, come on, Ethan. Stop being dramatic. That was it. That was the moment I knew. There was no fixing this. No salvaging. No half-assed apologies or fake tears would ever make me forget the look on her face when she thought I wouldn't be home. I took a slow, deep breath. Then, calmly, deliberately, I walked over to my dresser, pulled open the top drawer, and took out my phone. She frowned. What are you doing? I looked her dead in the eye. Calling a divorce lawyer. For the first time that night, real fear flickered across her face. Not because she was sorry. Not because she regretted it. But because she knew, really knew, that she had just lost everything. And I wasn't done yet. Jessica's expression shifted from shock to something I'd seen 100 times before. Calculating. She wasn't thinking about what she'd done. She wasn't thinking about me, our marriage, or the fact that she just destroyed everything. No, she was thinking about herself. About how to control the situation. About how to spin it. Ethan, she said, her voice suddenly softer, like she thought she could smooth this over if she just played it right. Can we just talk before you do anything drastic? I scoffed. Drastic? She was in our bed with another man 10 minutes ago, and she thought the divorce was the drastic part? She reached for me, but I stepped back. Don't, I said, and the coldness in my voice must have finally registered because her hand dropped. You don't get to touch me. She exhaled sharply, like I was the one being unreasonable. Ethan, please. I can explain. I laughed, shaking my head. Explain what exactly? Explain how long you've been sneaking around? Explain why some random douchebag was in my house screwing my wife. My voice was rising now, the weight of everything crashing down at once. Or were you going to explain why you smiled when you thought I wasn't coming back? Her face twitched at that last part. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? A pause. A second too long. I nodded. That's what I thought. She sighed, running a hand through her hair, frustration creeping into her expression. Not guilt, frustration. Like I was the problem here. And then she said the dumbest thing she could have possibly said. It didn't mean anything. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Didn't mean anything? 7 years together, and she was willing to burn it all down for something that didn't mean anything? I felt something inside me harden. Whatever part of me still wanted to understand, still wanted answers, died in that moment. I turned away and walked toward the closet. She frowned. What are you doing? I pulled out a suitcase, threw it onto the bed, and started grabbing clothes. Not mine, hers. She gawked. Wait. Ethan, what the hell? I didn't answer. I just kept shoving her things into the bag. Dresses, shoes, whatever my hands landed on. She ran up and grabbed my arm. Ethan, stop. I yanked my arm free. No. You stop. I zipped up the suitcase, turned, and shoved it into her chest hard enough to make her stumble back. Get out. She blinked. What? You heard me. Get out. She actually laughed, disbelieving. You can't be serious. I stepped forward, inches from her face. Oh, I'm dead serious. She shook her head, her own anger flaring. I live here, Ethan. You don't just get to kick me out like some. This is my house. I snapped. My name's on the mortgage. Mine. And in case you forgot, adultery doesn't exactly win you sympathy points in a divorce. That one landed. She hesitated, eyes darting around like she was looking for a way out. Then she tried again. Ethan, please, let's just. Are you pregnant? The question fell out of my mouth before I even thought about it. Jessica froze, and suddenly I knew. I took a step back. My whole body went cold. No, I whispered. No. Tell me you're not. She didn't answer. My stomach flipped. My chest tightened. The room spun for a second, the floor tilting under my feet. I stared at her, my brain screaming. Say no. Just say no. Say you were careful. Say this isn't what I think it is. But she just stood there, silent, guilty. I felt something in me break. And then, through gritted teeth, I said the only thing left to say. Get out of my house. Now. Jessica didn't move. She just stood there, clutching the suitcase like it was the only thing holding her up. Her lips parted, her eyes darting left and right, searching, calculating. Ethan, don't. My voice was raw, edged with something dangerous. Don't you dare try to talk your way out of this. She swallowed. I was going to tell you. I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. When? Before or after the baby started looking nothing like me? She winced, which meant I was right. The truth was written all over her face. The math didn't add up. We hadn't been together in weeks, maybe months. The distance, the late nights, the sudden mood swings. It all clicked, and she knew. Who is he? My voice was quiet now. Too quiet. Jessica's grip tightened on the suitcase. What does it matter? My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Who is he, Jessica? She hesitated. He's no one. I snapped. With one quick motion, I grabbed the suitcase from her hands and flung it across the room. It hit the wall with a loud thud, the contents spilling out. A mess of clothes, shoes, the pieces of the life she just shattered. She gasped, stepping back. Jesus, Ethan. No one. I stepped forward. You threw away everything for no one? Our marriage, our home, me. For no one. She bit her lip, hesitating. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." I stared at her, feeling something deep inside me splinter. "It wasn't supposed to happen at all," I said, my voice shaking. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Then she did what she always did. She tried to take control. "Ethan," she started, her voice slipping into something softer, pleading. "I know you're angry, but we don't have to do this like this. Let's just sit down. Let's talk. Please." Talk? Talk? I took a slow, deep breath, forcing the rage back down. Not because I wasn't angry, but because anger wasn't enough anymore. I turned, walked to the dresser, and pulled open a drawer. Jessica stiffened. "What are you doing?" I pulled out a folder and turned back to her. Calm. Steady. And then, I dropped it at her feet. She glanced down. A flicker of confusion. "What's this?" I folded my arms. "Divorce papers." Her breath hitched. "What?" I tilted my head. "You think I didn't have a backup plan?" She blinked. Once. Twice. Then she laughed. A disbelieving, almost nervous laugh. "You're bluffing." I said nothing. Her face twisted. You can't just decide this on your own." I shrugged. "Sure I can." Her eyes darted to the folder, then back to me. "Ethan, don't be ridiculous. You're not thinking clearly." "Oh, I'm thinking very clearly." I took a step closer. "You see, I've known something was off for months. I just didn't want to believe it. But that didn't stop me from preparing." Her breathing picked up. "What do you mean?" I let the silence stretch, let the tension tighten around her like a noose. And then I dropped the bomb. "I hired a private investigator." Her entire body went rigid. "What?" she whispered. I smiled, slow and cold. "Oh yeah, weeks ago. You really thought you were sneaky, didn't you?" Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "You." I pulled my phone from my pocket, tapped the screen a few times, then held it up. And there it was. Photos. Dozens of them. Jessica, her lover, kissing in parking lots, walking into hotels. His car parked outside my house at night. A full-blown affair, documented in high definition. Her face drained of color. "Ethan." I stepped forward, lowering my voice to a deadly whisper. "I've got everything, Jessica. Texts, calls, bank statements, hotel receipts, a full goddamn report." I leaned in. "And guess what? Adultery is grounds for an at-fault divorce in this state." She froze. And that's when the real fear hit. Not fear of losing me. Fear of losing the money, the house, the comfortable life she'd been so sure she could keep. I smiled. "I've already spoken to my lawyer. I get the house. I get the assets. And you? You get nothing." She stumbled back, shaking her head. No, no, Ethan, please, we can fix this." I just looked at her. And then, I said the words that finally broke her. "There's nothing left to fix." And for the first time that night, she was the one who looked broken. Jessica stood there, breathing heavily, her face drained of color. But I knew her. She wasn't crying because she regretted what she did. She was crying because she got caught. Because she realized she wasn't the one in control anymore. Her lips trembled as she tried to form words. "Ethan, listen to me." I turned away, picking up the suitcase I had thrown earlier. With one swift motion, I zipped it back up and shoved it toward her. "Get out." She didn't take it. "You're not thinking straight." I let out a sharp breath, rubbing my temples. "Jessica, for once in your life, shut the hell up and leave." She hesitated, then, like the manipulator she was, her expression changed. The wide, desperate eyes turned sharp. The softness in her voice hardened. And just like that, the real Jessica came out. "Oh, I see how it is." Her voice was low, mocking. "You think you're so righteous, so above everything. But let's not pretend, Ethan. You weren't exactly the perfect husband either." I exhaled, tilting my head. "Go on. Let's hear it." She crossed her arms, shifting her weight. "You were never home. I stared at her. I was working. For us. She smirked. Oh, right. For us. How convenient. Maybe if you had actually been around, I wouldn't have had to find someone who was. I clenched my fists. You mean the guy who knocked you up? Her smirk vanished. A nerve struck, deep. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Tell me something, Jess. When exactly were you planning to let me in on that little detail? At the baby shower? The hospital? Or were you just going to let me raise someone else's kid like a goddamn idiot? Her jaw clenched. It wasn't like that. Then how was it? Silence. She had nothing. Because there was no excuse. No justification. Just betrayal dressed up in weak excuses. I turned away, rubbing my face, trying to steady myself. I could feel the anger pressing against my ribs, demanding to be let out, but I refused to give her that satisfaction. She wanted a fight. She thrived on chaos. But I was done playing her game. Then she tried another angle. Ethan, I still love you. I laughed. Loud. Genuine. Then I turned back to her, shaking my head. You don't love me, Jessica. You love what I give you. The house. The comfort. The security. I gestured around us. This life? This wasn't enough for you. So don't stand there and insult me by pretending you care. She opened her mouth, but I wasn't done. And let me make one thing very clear. You don't get to play the victim here. I stepped closer, dropping my voice to a dangerous whisper. You chose this. You threw everything away. And now you're going to live with the consequences. Her breath hitched, her hands trembling at her sides. For the first time, she looked truly scared. Not of me, but of what was coming next. I pulled out my phone and, without breaking eye contact, started dialing. Jessica's eyes widened. Who are you calling? I smirked. Oh, you'll see. The line rang once, twice, then, hello. A man's voice. Jessica flinched. I grinned. Hey, buddy. You might want to come pick up your girl. Silence. Then, a sharp intake of breath from the other end. Jessica's face turned ghostly white. Ethan, don't. But I just kept smiling. Because this was only the beginning. The silence on the other end of the line stretched. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Then the man finally spoke, his voice hesitant. Who is this? I grinned, enjoying the panic flashing across Jessica's face. Oh, come on. You know who this is. Jessica lunged for my phone, but I stepped back, holding it just out of reach. Ethan, stop. I ignored her. I take it she didn't mention me? Wow, that's rough, man. I let out a mocking sigh. I hate to be the one to break it to you, but you've been sleeping with a married woman. My wife, to be exact. The line went dead silent. Jessica was shaking now, eyes wide, her entire body coiled with tension. Ethan, please. You don't have to do this. I arched a brow. Oh, but I do. The man finally found his voice. What the? He stopped, his breathing uneven. Are you serious? I chuckled. Dead serious, my guy. A pause. Then, his voice dropped to something tight, uneasy. Is she pregnant? Jessica actually gasped. Bingo. So he didn't know either. I turned my gaze to Jessica, watching as her entire body locked up. Her hands gripped into fists, her breath coming in short, panicked bursts. She had never told him. This was better than I could have hoped for. I let the silence stretch just long enough for the tension to choke the room. Then finally I answered. Yeah, she is. Jessica screamed. It wasn't a word, just a raw, desperate sound as she lunged at me again, clawing for the phone. Give me that. I sidestepped her easily, watching as she stumbled forward, catching herself against the bedpost. She spun around, eyes wild, furious. You're ruining my life, Ethan. I just smirked. No, sweetheart. You did that all on your own. The man on the other end cursed under his breath. I could hear him moving, grabbing keys, maybe pacing. He was panicking. He probably had a wife of his own. Maybe kids. Maybe a whole life that Jessica was about to blow up. Where are you? He finally asked. Jessica lost it. Ethan, hang up the damn phone. She shrieked, her voice cracking. This isn't funny. I shrugged, ignoring her. Our house. The one she shared with me while she was sneaking around behind my back. More silence. Then, I'm on my way. I smirked. Good. She's got a suitcase ready for her. Jessica's face was red, her entire body shaking. You! Her voice was breathless, stunned. You're a monster. I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. Oh? And what does that make you? She didn't answer. She couldn't, because the truth was written all over the wreckage of the life she'd just blown up. I ended the call. Then, slowly, deliberately, I walked over to the front door, opened it, and gestured toward it with a mocking flourish. Time to go, sweetheart. Jessica didn't move at first. Her hands were shaking, her breathing erratic, like she was teetering on the edge of a breakdown. Then, like clockwork, her expression changed. Her shoulders straightened, her jaw tightened, and suddenly the fear, the panic, it was gone. She lifted her chin, giving me a cold, piercing glare. You'll regret this, Ethan. I smiled, really smiled. Oh, I hope so. And then, with one final glare, she grabbed the suitcase, stormed past me, and walked out the door. I didn't watch her leave, because she wasn't worth watching anymore. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The door slammed behind Jessica, rattling the walls. I exhaled, letting my shoulders drop. The house was finally quiet. No more lies, no more gaslighting. Just me and the wreckage she left behind. I didn't have long to enjoy it. Barely 10 minutes later, headlights flashed through the front windows. A car screeched to a stop in the driveway. I knew who it was before I even looked. Jessica's other man. I took my time, pouring myself a drink as I heard a car door slam. Then, heavy, hurried footsteps pounded up my driveway. The doorbell rang once, twice, followed by furious knocking. I smirked. Showtime. I opened the door and there he was. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a button-up that was now wrinkled from stress. He had the kind of face that belonged in finance. Clean-cut, expensive watch, hair styled like he walked out of a goddamn cologne commercial. And his eyes? Wide, desperate, terrified. Yeah. He definitely had a wife. Where is she? His voice was tight, breathless. I took a slow sip of my drink before answering. Drove off about 10 minutes ago. Didn't even say goodbye. His jaw clenched. You had no right to call me. I let out a sharp laugh. Oh, I had no right? I leaned against the doorframe. Buddy, you were screwing my wife. I'd say I had every damn right. He flinched but didn't argue. Instead, he ran a hand through his hair, pacing on my porch like a caged animal. This can't be happening, he muttered. I tilted my head. So she didn't tell you she was married? Silence. I smiled. She did, didn't she? I let out a low whistle. Wow, and you still went for it. That's rough, man. His fists clenched. Look, I didn't come here to fight. I nodded. Good, because you'd lose. He stilled, eyes locking onto mine. And for the first time, I saw something else in them. Not just panic. Not just desperation. Rage. And that's when I realized he wasn't just mad at me. He was mad at her. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Let me guess. She didn't tell you she was pregnant either? His nostrils flared. He took a slow, sharp breath. Is it? I smirked. Well, it sure as hell isn't mine. That did it. He turned, pacing faster, running both hands down his face. This is a nightmare. I shrugged. Welcome to my world. Then, before I could say anything else, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his entire face drained of color. I didn't have to guess who it was. My wife, he whispered. I grinned. Jackpot. He swallowed hard, debating whether to answer. But we both knew he didn't have a choice. His hand shook as he picked up. Hey babe. A pause. Then, what? No, He exhaled sharply, pinching the bridge of his nose. I don't know what you're talking about. A lie? A bad one. I leaned against the doorframe, watching him crumble in real time. More yelling from the other end. His wife wasn't stupid. She knew. Finally, he snapped. Damn it, Melissa. Can we talk about this later? I whistled. Oof. First name basis. That's not good. He shot me a glare, but he was too rattled to say anything. Then, with one final curse, he ended the call and shoved his phone in his pocket. We stood there in silence. Then, finally, I patted his shoulder. Rough night, huh? He exhaled shakily. You have no idea. I smiled. Oh, I think I do. Then, with a lazy stretch, I turned back toward my house. Where are you going? He asked. I shrugged. Inside. Gonna grab some popcorn. I have a feeling things are about to get real interesting. And as I closed the door behind me, I heard him let out a low, broken laugh. Because he knew this wasn't over. For either of us. The chaos wasn't over. If anything, it was just getting started. After I shut the door, I stood there for a moment, gripping my glass, listening to the muffled curses coming from outside. The guy, Jessica's side piece, was still pacing on my damn porch, muttering to himself like his whole world had just collapsed. And honestly, probably had. Good. I walked back to the kitchen, taking another slow sip of my drink, savoring the moment. I should have felt worse, right? Should have felt something other than cold satisfaction. But no. Jessica played her game, and now it was all crashing down around her. And her boyfriend? Just collateral damage. I was about to sit down when my phone buzzed. Jessica. I let it ring. Then, another call. Then a text. Ethan, pick up the phone. Now. I stared at the screen, debating. Then another message popped up. You don't know what you've done. I snorted. Oh, I know exactly what I've done, sweetheart. I was about to ignore it when another set of headlights swept through my window. Another car. I frowned, standing up. It screeched to a stop right next to the first one. Then, the driver's door flew open, and a woman stepped out. Not Jessica. Not a stranger, either. It was his wife. Melissa. Oh, this was about to get good. I moved back toward the door, quietly opening it just enough to watch. Melissa stormed up the driveway, her expression murderous. Meanwhile, Jessica's boy toy was still pacing like a nervous wreck, running his hands through his hair. He didn't even notice her until she was right there, right in his face. Then, slap. I actually flinched. That was loud. He stumbled back, clutching his cheek. Melissa! She cut him off, jabbing a finger into his chest. You lying, cheating, pathetic excuse for a husband. Oof, he stammered. Babe, I can explain. She laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. Oh, can you? Because your affair partner's husband just called me to let me know you knocked up his wife. So please, go ahead, explain. His mouth opened, closed. Then, he turned, glaring at me. I grinned, lifting my glass in a toast. Yeah. He was screwed. Jessica must have been watching, too, because suddenly, her car came speeding back down the street. She slammed on the brakes, barely missing Melissa's car, and jumped out. Melissa, wait. Oh, now she wanted to talk. Melissa turned, eyes blazing. Oh, hell no. She marched up to Jessica so fast she actually backpedaled. You were screwing my husband? Jessica put her hands up. Melissa, I swear, I never meant. Melissa lunged. I don't know what she was planning to do, but Jessica shrieked and bolted behind her car. Stop. We can talk about this. Melissa was not in the mood for talking. Oh, now you want to talk. You weren't talking when you were spreading your legs for my husband. Were you? Jessica's boy toy finally jumped in, grabbing Melissa's arm. Babe, please, let's just. She whipped around and shoved him so hard he actually stumbled. Do not touch me. I nearly choked on my drink. This was so much better than I ever could have planned. Jessica must have realized she wasn't winning this one, because suddenly her expression shifted. Fine, she snapped, flipping her hair. You know what? You want to be mad? Be mad. But don't act like I was the only one at fault here. She turned to Melissa, pointing at her husband. Maybe if he wasn't so desperate for attention, none of this would have happened. Melissa lunged again. Jessica yelped and dove into her car, slamming the door shut. Melissa pounded on the window. Get out and face me, you coward. Jessica revved the engine, looking petrified. Then, she threw the car into reverse and sped off. Melissa stood there, breathing heavily, her fists still clenched. Then, slowly, she turned back to her husband. He swallowed hard. Babe, he tried. She smiled. Then, without warning, she threw her wedding ring at his face, pinged off his forehead, and he winced. Pack your crap, she said coldly. You're out of the house. Then, without another word, she turned, marched back to her car, and peeled off into the night. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle. Then, finally, I stepped outside, stretching. Jessica's boy toy was still standing in my driveway, staring after his wife's car like an idiot. I clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Welp." He flinched. I grinned. "Tough night, huh?" His eye twitched. I gave him a pat. "Better start looking for an apartment." Then, without waiting for an answer, I walked back inside and shut the door. God, that felt good. I barely had time to enjoy the aftermath before my phone rang again. Jessica. I let it ring. Again. Then another call. And another. By the time the sixth call came through, my curiosity got the best of me. I sighed, put my drink down, and finally answered. "What?" Her voice came through, breathless and shaking. "Ethan, you ruined my life." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, I ruined your life? That's rich, Jess. Real rich. You didn't have to call Melissa," she shrieked. "You didn't have to expose everything." I leaned against the counter, rolling my eyes. "What did you think was gonna happen, Jessica? That I'd just find out, sit quietly in my corner, and let you get away with it? You didn't have to be so cruel." I scoffed. "You got pregnant by another man and lied to my face about it. And now you're crying because I didn't just let it slide." She was breathing hard on the other end. I was going to tell you." I clenched my jaw. "Bullshit." "I was," she insisted, desperate. I needed to figure out how." I cut her off. "Jessica, you had months. And instead of coming clean, you kept screwing him. In my house. In my bed." Silence. I nodded to myself. "That's what I thought." Her voice was barely a whisper now. "I never meant to hurt you." I let that hang in the air for a moment before answering. "Yeah? Well, you did." Another stretch of silence. Then her tone changed. The softness disappeared. "Fine," she snapped. "You want to play dirty? Let's play dirty." I smirked. There it was. The real Jessica. She exhaled sharply. "You think you're gonna walk away from this scot-free? You think I won't fight you in the divorce?" I tilted my head. "Jess, you don't have a single card left to play." "You don't know that," she snapped. "You don't know what I'm capable of." I sighed. "Jessica, do you really want to make this worse for yourself?" She hesitated just for a second. But then she went in for the kill. "You know, Ethan, you weren't exactly innocent in this marriage either." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Oh, come on," she sneered. "You really think I didn't notice? You've been distant for months. Months. And I'm supposed to believe you were just busy with work." I clenched my jaw. "You'd better watch where you're going with this." She laughed bitterly. "Tell me, Ethan, was there someone else?" I rubbed my temples. "Jesus Christ, Jessica. I knew it," she spat. "You weren't any better than me. You just didn't get caught." I let out a breath, trying to keep my cool. "You're unbelievable." "Oh, am I?" she shot back. "Well, guess what, Ethan? If I go down, I'm taking you with me." I smiled. "There it is." "See, that's where we're different, Jess," I said, my voice calm. "You cheat, you lie, and then you blame everyone else when it falls apart." "Me?" I chuckled. "I don't need to lie. I just win." Her breathing hitched. "This isn't over." I grinned. "Oh, sweetheart, it's already over." And then, I hung up. The second I hung up, I knew Jessica wasn't done. She never lost. At least, not without trying to drag everyone else down with her. And sure enough, 10 minutes later, I got the proof. A new text. "You're gonna regret humiliating me, Ethan." I chuckled. Oh, this should be good. A second later, another one. "Hope you're ready for what's coming next." I rolled my eyes. Jessica was all bark, no bite. She had nothing left. No leverage, no power, no home. Just an empty threat from a woman who had just torched her entire life. Or so I thought. Because 20 minutes later, someone else was knocking at my door. And it wasn't Jessica. I opened it, expecting maybe her lover coming back for round 2. Maybe to beg for sympathy. But instead, I was met with someone I wasn't expecting. 2 cops, standing on my front porch. "Ethan Reynolds?" I frowned. "Yeah." One of them, a middle-aged guy with tired eyes, sighed. "We got a report about a domestic disturbance at this address." I blinked. "A what?" The second cop, a woman, checked her notepad. A woman named Jessica Reynolds called in, said she was forced out of her home under threats of violence. My stomach dropped. Oh, she was really doing this. I let out a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Officers, you've got the wrong story here. I didn't force her anywhere. She cheated. I told her to leave. She left on her own. The cops exchanged a look. The male officer rubbed his jaw. Mind if we come in? I stepped aside, letting them in. I had nothing to hide. Be my guest. They did a quick scan of the house. No signs of a struggle. No broken furniture. Nothing remotely resembling a domestic disturbance. The female officer turned back to me. Was there any physical altercation between you and Mrs. Reynolds? I laughed, shaking my head. Nope. I kicked her out. She threw a tantrum. And now she's trying to ruin my life because she got caught cheating. The male officer sighed. We get a lot of cases like this. That caught me off guard. You do. He nodded. Messy breakups. One side gets bitter and tries to weaponize the system. We still have to check. But this doesn't look like anything serious. The female officer closed her notepad. We'll file this as a dispute, not a disturbance. Just a heads up, though. If she pushes this, you might want to get ahead of it legally. I nodded, my jaw tightening. Already in the process. They left after that, and I shut the door behind them, my heart still pounding. I stood there for a long moment, gripping the doorknob, staring at nothing. Jessica wasn't just trying to win anymore. She was trying to ruin me, and that was a whole different game. One I wasn't about to lose. Jessica had officially crossed the line. Cheating was one thing. Lying, manipulating, trying to gaslight me. I expected all of that from her. But calling the cops, trying to paint me as some kind of violent abuser, that was war. And if she wanted war, I was going to give her the battle of a lifetime. The next morning, I was at my lawyer's office before they even opened. I wasn't playing defense anymore, I was going for the kill. The moment I sat down in front of my attorney, I laid out everything. The affair, the pregnancy, the false report to the police, the evidence I had gathered, all neatly packaged in a folder of screenshots, photos, private investigator reports. Hell, I even had a copy of her texts threatening me. My lawyer, a no-nonsense guy named Carter, flipped through the documents, nodding slowly. Then he leaned back in his chair and let out a low whistle. Jesus Christ, Ethan. She really tried it. Huh. I exhaled sharply. Oh, she tried. But I'm not letting her win this. He smirked. Good. Because after this, she's done. And that's when he dropped the real bombshell. Adultery and false accusations aside, you know what's going to hurt her the most? He asked, tapping the folder. I raised a brow. What? He leaned forward, a gleam in his eye. She's pregnant, right? And you're sure the baby isn't yours? I scoffed. Not even a chance. He grinned. Then we file a denial of paternity alongside the divorce. That baby legally won't be yours. No rights, no responsibilities, nothing. And considering she doesn't have a stable income, he shook his head. She's gonna be screwed. I blinked. Then, slowly, a grin spread across my face. Oh, I murmured. That's beautiful. We got to work immediately. The divorce papers were already drawn up. But now, we were adding everything. The evidence of her affair. The proof that she'd falsely accused me. The financial records showing that I alone had been paying for our house, our bills, our entire goddamn life. Jessica wasn't just losing me. She was losing everything. The final blow. 2 days later, she got served. I didn't tell her it was coming. Didn't warn her. Just let the court documents hit her right in the face. And oh, she lost it. My phone blew up immediately. You can't do this to me. I'll fight this, Ethan. You won't win. You're making a huge mistake. I didn't respond. Just sat back, sipping my coffee, enjoying the meltdown. Then the final message came through. I hope you're happy. You ruined my life. I smiled, exhaling in satisfaction. No, Jessica. You ruined your own life. I just made sure you paid for it. I blocked her number. She wasn't my problem anymore. The last I heard, her lover had dumped her the second he got served with his own divorce papers. Apparently, Being publicly humiliated in front of his wife wasn't exactly what he had in mind when he decided to screw around with my wife. Jessica, now jobless, homeless, and very pregnant with a baby that no man wanted to claim, was left scrambling for a way to survive. And me? I walked away clean. No baggage. No obligations. Just freedom. And let me tell you, revenge had never tasted so sweet.